Chapter 1. The Girl No One Noticed. They never saw me coming. Not really. In the narrow hallways of my high school, I was a shadow, a whisper. The girl with secondhand sweaters, always a few inches too long in the sleeves, and notebooks filled more with scribbles of dreams than actual math notes. I had one pair of boots, scuffed at the toe, and a backpack patched with hope and wear. My hair was always pulled into a lazy ponytail, not because I didn't care, but because I was busy carrying things no one ever asked about. They didn't see the girl who left home before sunrise, who walked in the cold just to make it to the library when the doors opened. They didn't notice how I sat at the far end of the cafeteria, reading books thicker than their patience. They never stopped to wonder why someone who barely spoke always seemed to know the answers in class. They saw what they wanted, a nobody, invisible, average at best. And I let them. Because that's what diamonds do. They hide beneath pressure, waiting, learning, growing harder, stronger, until the light finds them and suddenly no one can look away. They laughed at me, called me names behind their manicured hands. Charity Case was a favorite. The quiet weirdo? Sometimes just her. My locker was dented from years of being slammed shut by hands that thought they were clever. But I never fought back. Not with words, at least. I fought with patience and purpose. I didn't need their parties. I didn't need their fake friendships or their filtered selfies. I had something they didn't, a vision. I knew I wasn't going to stay stuck in that tiny town with its smaller minds. I had maps pinned inside my journal, cities I wanted to see, scholarships I planned to win, stories I was going to write. My future was a fire no one could smother. Mom used to say, "Sometimes, baby, God wraps gold in rags just to see who notices." I used to think that was just something she said to make me feel better. But the older I got, the more I understood. Some of us weren't meant to be seen right away. We were meant to build in silence, rise in shadows, shine when they least expect it. Every night, while they posted selfies from parties I wasn't invited to, I was building myself. I read business books when they were on TikTok. I worked part-time while they shopped. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. And now, I'm standing on the edge of everything I was told I couldn't have. I'm not the same girl they overlooked. I'm not the girl they mocked in locker rooms or whispered about in bathroom stalls. I'm the girl who survived it all, quietly, fiercely. I am the girl who learned to glow in the dark. They didn't see it then, but they will, because I'm no longer hiding, no longer shrinking, no longer waiting for permission to shine. This is just the beginning, and they're about to witness what happens when a diamond steps into the light. Mornings were always the hardest. It wasn't the alarm or the cold floor that got to me. It was the mirror. That old, cracked thing above the sink didn't just reflect who I was. It reflected everything I wasn't. No filter, no soft lighting, no lies. Just a tired girl with too much hope and too little help. Every time I looked into it, I didn't see ugly, I saw invisible. A person who hadn't been chosen, noticed, or remembered. At school, mirrors were everywhere. Not literal ones, but looks, glances, sideways smirks. They were in the way girls sized each other up, ranked each other silently, treated beauty like currency. And me? I didn't have enough in the bank. They didn't laugh at me outright. That would have required attention. I was beneath mockery, the kind of girl who gets forgotten even while she's sitting right there. Still, it hurt. It hurt in a quiet, lingering way. The kind that doesn't show up in tears, but in silence. In choosing to eat lunch behind the library shelves instead of the cafeteria. In walking the longer hallway route to avoid the crowd by the lockers. In pretending not to hear when someone says your name followed by laughter. One particular day stuck with me. It was raining, the kind of light, annoying drizzle that makes your clothes cling to your skin. I was in the bathroom drying my hands when I overheard two girls talking near the mirror. One of them casually said, "Why does she always look like she shops at the thrift store for punishment?" They both laughed, not realizing I was still there. Or maybe realizing and not caring. I stood frozen, willing myself not to care. But I did. Oh, I did. That night, I stood in front of my own mirror longer than usual. I took it all in. The dull ends of my hair, the circles under my eyes, the cheap drugstore lip balm half faded on my lips. It didn't feel fair. I worked harder than they did. I read more. I tried more. I felt more. But somehow that never counted. In this world, value was measured by brands, boyfriends, and who you sat with at lunch. But there was something in my eyes that held. A flicker of fire, small but undeniable. A quiet voice that whispered, "You are still here." It wasn't much, but it was enough. I decided to stop letting the mirror tell the whole story. I would start telling it myself. So I began a new ritual. Every morning, after brushing my teeth and tying my hair, I'd look into the mirror and say something true. Not necessarily positive, just true. You made it through yesterday. You don't need them to believe in you. One day, you'll look back and smile at this version of you. It wasn't a miracle cure. I didn't wake up gorgeous or confident overnight, but something began to shift. I walked a little taller, not because I believed I was beautiful, but because I was tired of being ashamed of existing. I started owning my space, little by little. It wasn't about fashion or makeup. It was about worth, and the fact that I didn't have to earn it from them. I started noticing the things I did like. The way my eyes crinkled when I smiled, something my mom said made me look like her. The way my voice didn't waver when I read aloud in class. The way I listened when people spoke, not just to reply, but to understand. I had things they didn't. Things they couldn't steal or fake. Some mornings were better than others. There were days when I couldn't say anything in the mirror without my throat tightening. But even then, I still looked. I still faced it, because pretending I didn't exist had never worked. Maybe seeing myself clearly was the first step to helping them see me too. Over time, my confidence stopped being something I had to talk myself into. It started living in me, quietly, like a seed breaking through concrete. The kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but shows up when you need it most. And the more I believed in who I was becoming, the less their opinions mattered. Not because they changed, but because I did. That mirror? It still cracked a little at the corner, still tilted slightly to the left. But when I looked into it now, I saw a girl who had survived being invisible and came out luminous. Maybe not in the way they defined beauty, but in the way only truth could make someone shine. And that was enough, for now. Because I knew my reflection wasn't the final version. It was just the rough cut, the beginning of something polished, sharp, unforgettable. A diamond in disguise, still under pressure, but starting to glow. No one saw. In the back of my history notebook, right between notes on civil wars and dusty timelines, was a secret list, a handwritten roadmap of every dream I had. Not in vague terms either. It had names, dates, and even dollar amounts. I called it the Shine List. Every item on it was a promise to myself, scribbled in ink that bled a little when I got nervous and gripped the pen too tightly. Number 1, win a full-ride scholarship. That one had stars around it, as if the universe might take notice. Number 2, get out of town. I didn't mean just physically. I meant emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I wanted to leave behind the version of me they thought they knew. Number 3, make them remember my name. Not because I begged for attention, but because I gave them no choice. The list grew over time. Small things like buy a real winter coat sat next to huge things like stand on a TEDx stage. Some days, writing those dreams felt delusional. Who was I to think I could do any of this? But on the days when I felt like shrinking, the Shine List reminded me of the girl who refused to disappear. It wasn't about proving them wrong. Not really. It was about proving myself right. About making space for a version of me who didn't apologize for dreaming beyond hand-me-downs and hallway stairs. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but knowing why was enough to keep me going. I started carrying that notebook everywhere. It became a strange comfort. In class, during breaks, even when I was cleaning at my part-time job, I'd sneak a peek at the list. Each line read like a secret I wasn't supposed to keep, and yet, it kept me alive. I started checking things off slowly. Winning a regional essay contest. Saving enough for college applications. Getting invited to a leadership conference, even if I had to sleep on someone's couch to attend. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't think they'd get it. People like me didn't get to have blueprints. We were expected to survive, not shine. But the more I leaned into that list, the more I noticed how differently I walked. Taller, quieter, more certain. One afternoon, while waiting for the bus, I sat on the curb rereading my entries when a girl from school, Maya, one of the pretty popular types, walked past. For a second, I saw her glance at the open page. She didn't stop or ask anything, but something in her eyes shifted. It wasn't pity, it was curiosity, and maybe a little respect. That moment lingered with me. Not because I needed validation from someone like her, but because it reminded me of something powerful. People notice more than they admit. Maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe I was just underestimated. And maybe that was my biggest advantage. I folded the page carefully and put the notebook back in my bag. The dreams weren't just words anymore. They were becoming blueprints. Every list starts as a whisper. But mine was beginning to echo. Chapter 4, when the world finally looked my way. It started small. A nod from my English teacher after I read my short story aloud in class. I had been shaking the entire time. My fingers clenched so tightly around the page that the paper nearly tore. But when I finished, there was a silence in the room that didn't feel like boredom. It felt like they had actually heard me. Later that day, someone I barely spoke to stopped me in the hallway. "That story was good," he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. But to me, it was everything. For the first time, someone saw more than my worn shoes and plain clothes. They saw something I created. Something mine. Word spread faster than I expected. A week later, I was asked to read at the school assembly. The thought alone made my stomach twist. Standing in front of everyone, the same people who had ignored me for years, felt terrifying. But I remembered my list. One of the goals said, "Speak so loud, even your past has to listen." This was my chance. I said yes. The night before the assembly, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over the words in my head, fixing commas and crossing out lines that suddenly felt too vulnerable. But by morning, I decided to leave it all in. If I was going to be seen, really seen, then they needed the real version of me, fear and all. The gym was packed. I stood on the stage, heart pounding like a war drum, and for a second, I thought I'd run. But then I looked up, not at the crowd, but at the exit signs behind them, and I told myself, "You've already walked away from worse than this." So I started reading. My voice was shaky at first, but each word built momentum. My story wasn't flashy. It wasn't about love or fame or violence. It was about a girl finding her worth, even when the world kept trying to erase her. And as I spoke, I saw faces change, eyebrows lift, hands lower from texting under desks. They were listening. Really listening. When I finished, there was no applause at first, just that same silence, thick, deep, almost reverent. Then someone clapped, then another. And before I knew it, the gym was echoing with something I'd never heard before. Approval. Recognition. A sound I didn't know I'd been craving. That night, I walked home under the stars, my head held higher than ever. It wasn't fame, it wasn't a scholarship, but it was something else. Something I'd never tasted. Visibility. I wasn't just the girl in the background anymore. The world had finally looked my way, and for the first time, it didn't look through me. Glow, they couldn't dim. The Monday after the assembly, everything felt different. Not drastically. No one threw a party in my honor or handed me a crown. But the way people looked at me shifted. There were more eyes meeting mine, more people moving slightly to the side when I passed in the hallway, more nods of recognition I wasn't used to receiving. It was subtle, quiet, but it was enough. Maya, the same girl who once called me unnoticeable, leaned over during chemistry and said, "I liked what you read. It felt real." I blinked, stunned, not just by her words, but by how sincere they sounded. I had braced myself for sarcasm or mockery, but instead I got honesty. And that was rarer than gold in high school. Something inside me changed that week. I wasn't walking faster to avoid attention anymore. I wasn't hunching my shoulders to take up less space. I still wore the same clothes, still packed my lunch from home, still read in corners. But now, I did it without apology. Confidence didn't come in a box. It grew in layers, and I was finally starting to feel its weight settle on my shoulders. That didn't mean everything got easier. In fact, the moment people started noticing me, some started questioning it too. "She's just trying to get attention," I overheard someone say near the lockers. One speech and now she thinks she's a poet or something. It stung. Of course it did. But instead of letting it silence me, I let it sharpen me. Because the truth is, people will always have something to say, especially when you start shining in spaces they never expected you to. I realized then that standing out isn't the hard part. It's staying bright when they try to dim you. That takes the real work. So I kept writing. I kept speaking. I joined the school's literary club, a place I had avoided before because I didn't think I belonged. But now, I showed up. I read my work. I gave feedback. I didn't pretend to know everything, but I knew me, and that was enough to take up space in the room. Mr. Daniels, my English teacher, noticed the change. After one meeting, he pulled me aside and said, "You've got a voice. You know, a clear one. Don't let anyone talk over it." His words landed like seeds in my chest, ones I'd water every time I doubted myself. I didn't need permission to bloom, but it felt good to have someone acknowledge the growth. At home, things remained the same. Small apartment, tight budget, long evenings helping Mom with laundry or cooking dinner. But even there, the air shifted. Mom caught me smiling more. She didn't ask why, she just said, "You've been walking lighter lately." I nodded, grateful she noticed. Grateful she'd always seen the shine in me, long before the world did. One night I looked in the mirror, the same cracked one, still slightly tilted, and something was different. Not the reflection, not really, but the energy. I didn't see a girl hiding anymore. I saw a girl rising, bit by bit, not perfectly, but powerfully. The glow was real now, and no matter what they said, it was mine. They couldn't dim it. Not anymore. Chapter 6, Cracks in the Spotlight. The more visible I became, the more exposed I felt. It's strange how the thing you crave for so long can also become the very thing that unsettles you. I had spent years wanting to be noticed, to be heard, and now that I sometimes caught myself wishing for the safety of invisibility again. The whispers didn't stop after the assembly, they just changed in tone. Some were kind, others curious, but a few were cutting. "She's acting different now," one girl said when I passed. "Like she thinks she's better than us." That line repeated in my head for days, louder than applause ever had. I didn't think I was better. I just finally believed I was enough. It wasn't just classmates either. A boy named Josh, who had never once looked in my direction before, suddenly started sitting near me during lunch. He laughed a little too loudly at my jokes, complimented my writing in a way that felt rehearsed. Part of me was flattered. The other part wondered if he saw me, or the version of me that had just gone viral in our tiny school world. I was cautious, not because I didn't want people close, but because I had learned what it felt like to be used as a step stool, someone others climbed over to reach their own spotlight. So I kept my circle small, my notebook, a growing friendship with Maya, and the quiet strength of my mother's presence at home. Maya surprised me. The same girl who used to barely glance my way started waiting for me after class. We studied together, shared fries at lunch, even walked home once when her ride bailed. She was different than I expected, softer, more uncertain. "I envy how sure you are," she told me once. I laughed. "I'm not sure of anything. I just keep showing up." That made her smile. But with visibility came pressure. Expectations. Some teachers began calling on me more, as if I'd always have the right answer. Strangers asked me when I was submitting to contests or writing another piece. It was flattering, yes, but it was also heavy. Suddenly, I wasn't just a student. I was a symbol, and symbols aren't allowed to have bad days. One afternoon, I bombed a quiz, completely blanked. I hadn't slept the night before, anxiety gnawing at my chest. I stared at the failing grades scrawled across the top in red ink and felt tears sting my eyes. For a moment, the old voice came back. "See? This was never going to last." I nearly tore up the paper, but instead I folded it, put it in my notebook, and reminded myself, "You're still allowed to be human." After that, I started carving out moments to breathe. I would sit on the roof of our apartment building at sunset, legs dangling over the edge, notebook in hand. No deadlines, no performances. Just me, writing what I felt, not what people wanted to hear. It was during one of those quiet moments that I realized something important. Shining doesn't mean burning out. There's power in choosing when to be seen and when to retreat. In knowing your worth isn't tied to applause or perception, that you can have cracks and still reflect light. So I learned to stand in the spotlight, but not live there. Chapter 7. Unwritten and Unafraid. It was Maya's idea to submit something to the state writing contest. She brought it up one afternoon while we sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by open bags of chips and math homework we were pretending to care about. "You've got something they need to hear," she said, casually, as though she was suggesting a new playlist, not a leap of faith. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to. Deep down I did. But because putting myself on that kind of stage meant more vulnerability, more eyes, more pressure. "What if they don't get it?" I asked, tapping my pen nervously against my knee. Maya shrugged. "Then that's on them. But what if they do?" That question stayed with me long after I left her house. That night, I sat on my bed with my notebook open and stared at the empty page. So many of my recent writings felt reactive. Responses to whispers, to praise, to pressure. But this one needed to come from a different place, not from a wound or a desire to prove anything. It needed to come from truth. I began with one line. I wasn't made to blend in. And then the words came like rain, steady, honest, unstoppable. I wrote about silence and fear, about strength hidden beneath doubt, about how sometimes the brightest light comes from learning to love the parts of yourself the world overlooks. It was raw. It was mine. The next day, I typed it up and gave it to Mr. Daniels to review. He read it in silence, his eyes narrowing in concentration. When he finished, he looked at me and said, "It's not just good, it's brave." And that meant more than any trophy ever could. Weeks passed. I almost forgot I had submitted it. School consumed my time again. Pop quizzes, group projects, family responsibilities. But something inside me had shifted. I walked differently. Not because anything had changed on the outside, but because something had settled on the inside. I no longer needed permission to take up space. Then one morning, I got called to the office. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe I was in trouble. But the secretary handed me a letter with the state seal and a gold-embossed header. I tore it open with trembling fingers and read, "Congratulations. You've been selected as a finalist in the State Voices writing competition." For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I reread the line, over and over. The girl who used to write in secret was now being asked to read aloud in front of hundreds. And for once, I wasn't afraid. I was excited. Because now, I wasn't writing to escape. I was writing to arrive, to announce myself to a world that once ignored me. And this time, I was showing up unwritten and unafraid. 8. The stage and the silence. The auditorium was twice the size of our school gym and packed with more people than I'd ever seen in one room without a game playing. Parents, students, judges, teachers, all gathered, eyes fixed on a stage I'd be standing on in less than 20 minutes. My name was listed fourth. Fourth out of 10 finalists from across the state. Backstage, I could barely feel my hands. I clutched my paper like it was a life raft. All the words I'd written felt suddenly too small, too personal, too vulnerable. What if I forgot a line? What if they didn't clap? What if they stared and I cracked under the weight of their silence? Maya had come with me. She sat in the second row, beaming like I'd already won something. She held her phone up, ready to record, mouthing the words, "You got this," as I peeked from behind the curtain. And just like that, her confidence steadied me. I remembered, this wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. When they called my name, everything slowed. I walked onto the stage with my heart pounding in my ears, each step louder than the last. The lights were hot and blinding, but oddly comforting. I found the microphone, unfolded my paper, and took a breath. The first line came out shaky, but the second was stronger. And by the third, my voice had found rhythm. I wasn't reading anymore. I was speaking, sharing, owning my story with every pause, every shift in tone, every beat of vulnerability. The room was silent, not because they were bored, but because they were listening. I didn't cry, though I felt the tears threatening. Instead, I smiled through the hardest lines, the ones about being invisible, about being underestimated, about how sometimes surviving becomes a kind of brilliance no one can ignore. And when I reached the final sentence, I was never lost. I was just waiting to be seen. I let it sit in the air like a note hanging in a song. The applause was immediate, not thunderous, but full. It filled the space like warm light. People stood. Not all at once, but enough that I saw faces lift and hands clap and even a few tears in the crowd. Maya was crying, proud and unfiltered, and I almost broke just watching her. Backstage, I didn't care if I won or not. I already had. I had stood on that stage, not as someone pretending to be something, but as myself. That, to me, was the greatest shine of all, the kind that doesn't dim when the lights go out. I walked away from that auditorium not with a trophy in hand, but with a flame inside. Something quiet, steady, unshakable. A stage hadn't changed me. It had revealed me. Chapter 9. More than just a name. The day after the competition, I walked through the school doors and something had shifted again. It wasn't dramatic, no balloons or announcements, but the energy was different. People I barely knew nodded at me in the halls. A few even stopped me with a quick, "Hey, saw your video," or "You're the poetry girl, right?" That one made me smile. Being recognized was new, but not everything about it felt good. Some reactions were genuine. Others felt performative, like people wanted to stand next to me now because they thought I mattered more than I had before. I couldn't blame them entirely. The world often only notices people once someone else says they're worth noticing. Still, I tried not to let it change me. I kept my head down during class, still sat near the back in the cafeteria, still walked home the long way so I could think. But inside, I knew something had evolved. I wasn't walking away from myself anymore. I was walking with myself, finally. Maya started calling me Shine as a joke, but it stuck. "You're like a walking flashlight," she'd tease, "blinding people with your glow." I'd roll my eyes, but I liked it. Not because I believed I was glowing, but because someone had finally given me a name I didn't have to shrink under. But with visibility came questions, most of them from within. Was I supposed to keep writing now? Was every piece supposed to be better than the last? What if I ran out of things to say? What if they stopped listening? Doubt creeped in quietly, the way it always did when life got too loud. One night, after too many spiraling thoughts, I sat at my desk and wrote something on a sticky note. "I am more than just a moment." I stuck it to my mirror, right beside the crack that curved like a lightning bolt down the center. It reminded me that my worth didn't expire with one speech, one applause, one recognition. My mom noticed the change too. She didn't say much. She rarely did about things like this, but I caught her watching me more often, especially when I was writing. One evening, she left a cup of tea by my notebook without a word, and that small gesture told me everything. Support doesn't always come with loud cheers. Sometimes it's just being seen in silence. By the end of the week, Mr. Daniels posted the official list for the school's literary magazine. I had not one, but 3 pieces included. When I saw my name typed under the contributors list, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just about the contest anymore. It wasn't even about being seen. It was about belonging. I was no longer just that quiet girl or the one who reads a lot. I had a name. Not just the one given to me, but the one I had carved out for myself through resilience, risk, and relentless honesty. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from who I was. I was running toward her. Chapter 10. The girl in the window. Saturday mornings used to be quiet in our apartment. The kind of quiet filled with the soft buzz of the refrigerator and the gentle rhythm of Mom's slippers against the linoleum floor. But lately they had started to feel different, not louder, but more awake. Like even the walls were listening now, waiting to see who I would become next. That particular morning, I sat by the living room window, legs curled beneath me, journal open. The sun leaked through the curtains in gentle gold, painting the floor with light. I was halfway through a poem when I saw a small girl outside on the sidewalk, staring up at our building. She was no older than 10. Her hair a cloud of curls, pulled into a crooked ponytail. She clutched a thin book to her chest like it was something precious. She didn't knock or call out. She just stood there, eyes on the windows above, as if waiting for something or someone. I watched her for a while before curiosity got the better of me. I slid on my sneakers, stepped outside, and approached her slowly. "Hi," I said, careful not to startle her. "Are you looking for someone?" She looked up, wide-eyed, and said, "Are you the girl who read the poem at the contest?" I froze. The wind caught my breath. "Yeah," I replied, uncertain. She beamed. "My cousin recorded it. I watch it all the time. You said it's okay to be quiet and to still shine." Her voice cracked slightly and something in my chest tightened. Her name was Lila. She lived in the next building over and had been coming by every morning hoping to see me. I didn't think girls like you lived in buildings like this, she admitted. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so real. I knew exactly what she meant. We sat on the stoop and talked for almost an hour. She showed me her notebook, pages filled with little poems about stars and monsters and dreams. Some spelled wrong, some scribbled out, all of them beautiful. I told her they were worth finishing. She told me I made her believe she could finish them. That day did something to me. I had always wanted to be seen, but I hadn't realized how powerful it felt to make someone else feel seen. It wasn't about fame or praise. It was about connection, about lighting a spark in someone else simply by being brave enough to be yourself. Later that evening, I wrote in my journal, "Shining isn't just for yourself, it's for the ones who haven't found their light yet." And I meant every word. Because Lila reminded me that visibility is a responsibility, one I was finally ready to carry. I looked back at my own reflection in the window before bed, and for the first time, I didn't just see the girl trying to shine. I saw the girl already glowing. And I smiled, because I knew this was just the beginning. 11. Echoes of the old me. The next week at school brought with it an unexpected twist, one I hadn't quite prepared for. As I rounded the corner near my locker one afternoon, I came face to face with Kayla. The same Kayla who used to whisper behind my back, roll her eyes when I raised my hand in class, and laugh a little too loudly when I tripped over my words. She smiled. Not mockingly, not cold, just genuinely. "Hey," she said, like we were friends, like years of quiet cuts didn't still linger between us. I nodded slowly, unsure what game she was playing now. "I read your poem," she added, her voice a little more cautious. "It was good, really good." I waited for the sarcasm that never came. There's something surreal about being complimented by someone who once treated you like you didn't belong. It made me feel proud, sure, but also strangely exposed. I thanked her politely and walked away, but her words followed me like a shadow the rest of the day. Not because of what she said, but because of how far I'd come since the days when people like her shaped my self-worth. Later that day, I found myself flipping through one of my old journals, pages full of rants and fears and tear-stained ink. I used to write in code, hiding my true feelings between metaphors and half-written stanzas. It was a survival tactic. Words were my only armor. Reading those entries felt like meeting an old version of myself, a girl who felt like she had to disappear to be safe. But the strange thing was, I didn't pity her. I admired her. Because even in all that fear and silence, she kept writing. Even when no one was listening, she wrote like the world depended on it. That night, I wrote a letter to my past self. I told her she was brave. I told her she was more than the way others treated her. I told her thank you for holding on, for never giving up on the quiet light inside her. The next morning, I walked to school with a different kind of clarity. My past didn't embarrass me anymore. It empowered me. Because every cruel comment, every long walk home, every page filled in secret had carried me to this version of myself. I even nodded to Kayla in the hallway. Not out of obligation, but because forgiveness feels lighter than bitterness. I wasn't trying to be her friend. I was simply releasing her from the space she no longer needed to hold in my story. You see, growth isn't just about shining. It's about remembering who you were before the light reached you, and loving that person just as fiercely. And I did. I really, really did. 12. When the light fades. It happened so slowly that I didn't even notice it at first, the quiet unraveling. I stopped writing for a few days, telling myself I was just tired. Then days turned into a week, and suddenly my journal sat unopened, untouched. My notebook, once filled with daily scribbles, remained blank no matter how long I stared at the pages. At first, I thought I was just creatively drained. The contest, the attention, the pressure, maybe it had all caught up to me. But deep down, I knew it was something else. I wasn't just tired. I was scared. Scared that I had already peaked, that everything after this would feel smaller, less worthy, less shiny. I began to pull away. From Maya, from school, from myself. I smiled when I needed to, nodded in the right places, but I wasn't present. I went through the motions like an actor in a scene I no longer believed in. My mother noticed. She didn't say anything outright, but she started checking in more often. A soft knock on my door, a cup of tea, longer hugs. Then came the rainy Wednesday afternoon when Maya cornered me by the lockers. "You've been off lately," she said, arms crossed, voice low. "You okay?" I almost lied, almost gave her the easy answer, but her eyes wouldn't let me. I shook my head. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be now," I whispered. She didn't offer a fix. She just nodded, and then, because she always knew me better than I realized, she pulled a folded sheet of notebook paper from her pocket. "I found this," she said. "It's from that day you helped Lila. I kept it because you said it so clearly." She handed me the note. Shining doesn't mean burning. It means showing up, even when the light feels dim. I cried that night. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet release of someone who's been holding too much. I let myself feel every bit of the pressure, the expectation, the weight of being the girl who shines. And then I wrote. Slowly, shakily. Just a few lines at first, not for an audience, not for applause, just for me. Writing wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. And sometimes, real is messy. Sometimes, it looks like rest, like tears, like asking for help, like sitting in silence and letting the feelings wash over you like waves. The next morning, I wrote a poem about forgetting who you are and remembering anyway. About finding beauty not in being bright, but in being brave enough to return to yourself again and again. It wasn't my best work, but it was the most honest I'd written in weeks. I shared it in class during open mic, voice soft but steady. No applause came, no standing ovation, just a quiet room, listening. And that, I realized, was enough. I didn't need the spotlight to feel worthy. I just needed to show up, even when the light faded. Chapter 13, A Light All My Own. Spring arrived with more sun and less noise. The chatter about the contest died down, the stares softened, and life found its way back to something quieter. For the first time in a while, I was thankful for the calm. I no longer felt like I was racing anyone. Not my peers, not expectations, not even myself. There was something beautiful about walking the halls unnoticed again. Only this time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt grounded. Like the world could go on with or without the spotlight, and I'd still have something of value to hold on to. Myself. My voice, my stories, my truth. Mr. Daniels approached me after class one day and asked if I'd consider mentoring a few younger students interested in writing. The request caught me off guard. Me? A mentor? I asked. He smiled, adjusting his glasses. You've been one without realizing it. That thought lingered in my mind for days. Meeting those students, 3 freshmen, awkward and hopeful, reminded me of myself at that age. One of them, Kemi, barely spoke above a whisper, but filled her notebook with verses about stars and storms. I saw in her the same quiet fire I once carried, and this time, I got to fan someone else's flame instead of hiding my own. I didn't have all the answers, but I had experience. I told them it was okay to be afraid, okay to write badly before writing well, okay to feel too much. They listened with wide eyes and open hearts, and in those moments, I didn't just feel like a writer. I felt like a builder of confidence, of courage, of possibility. Meanwhile, Maya and I had grown closer than ever. She was applying to art schools, and I helped her review her portfolio. We often sat together after school, her sketching quietly while I scribbled lines beside her. We didn't always talk, but our silence was comfortable, a space where creativity didn't need explanation. One day, she drew me, not in a literal sense, but as an abstract piece. A girl with light bursting from cracks in her skin. "This is how I see you," she said. I stared at the piece, touched beyond words. It wasn't perfect, but it was powerful. It captured what I had only recently begun to understand. That light doesn't come from being flawless, but from being whole, scars and all. I pinned that drawing above my desk next to my favorite quote. I am not the girl you remember. I am the woman I became. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was pretending to be strong. I was strong. Not because of what I had achieved, but because of what I had survived. Because I chose to stand tall in a world that once tried to keep me small. Because I stopped shrinking. Because I stopped apologizing. Because I finally found a light all my own. And this time, I wasn't afraid to let it shine. Chapter 14, The Letter I Wrote Myself. It started with a school project, a simple assignment from Mr. Daniels. Write a letter, he said, to someone you admire. It can be a celebrity, a historical figure, a mentor, anyone. As the class scribbled names like Maya Angelou, Serena Williams, and Kendrick Lamar, I sat frozen, my pen hovering above the page. Who did I admire most? For a while, I thought maybe I'd write to Maya, or maybe to my mother. But something inside nudged me in a different direction. A quieter voice, a more personal one. So I wrote to myself. Not the version of me who had just given a speech, or the girl with her name on a contest poster. I wrote to the girl I used to be, the one who cried silently in bathrooms, who doubted her worth every morning before school, who wrote in journals no one read, who looked in the mirror and tried to find something, anything, to love. Dear me, I began. I know you're tired. I know it feels like no one sees you, but I do. I see every tear you hide, every sentence you write in secret, every time you choose to keep going. I want you to know that everything you're surviving will shape someone remarkable. It was strange writing to my past self. Comforting, but also emotional. With every word, I honored the pain I once dismissed. I gave that younger version of me the compassion I had once begged for. I told her she was brave. I told her she mattered. I told her she was not a shadow of anything, but the beginning of everything. By the time I finished, I was crying softly. Not because I was sad, but because I had finally forgiven her. For being scared, for hiding, for doubting. She did the best she could with what she knew. And because of her, I had become someone who no longer needed to hide. I didn't read the letter aloud like some students did. I kept it folded in my journal, tucked between fresh poems and fading thoughts. It wasn't written for applause. It was written for healing. That weekend, I did something small but bold. I went to a bookstore downtown, found the poetry section, and slipped a copy of the letter between 2 volumes of contemporary verse. A quiet gift. A secret message for someone else who might be searching for light. Because if I had found a letter like that once, tucked into the pages of a book when I needed it most, I might have started shining sooner. Chapter 15, Watch Me Shine. Graduation came with the kind of energy that buzzed in your chest. Bright gowns, laughter echoing across the gym, teachers offering bittersweet smiles. My name was called, and for a moment, the world paused. I walked across that stage not just to receive a diploma, but to reclaim every moment I thought I'd never get here. The cheers didn't matter as much this time. It was the silence that I noticed, the stillness in my chest, the quiet peace. I wasn't performing anymore. I was arriving, and not into someone else's idea of success, but into my own. Into the life I had carved from every rejection, every whisper, every night I sat alone, wondering if I'd ever feel proud of the person I was becoming. After the ceremony, Maya grabbed my hand and twirled me like we were kids. "We did it," she said, beaming. She had paint on her hands, she always did, and a portfolio filled with vibrant, strange, beautiful art that the world would one day know. I looked at her and felt nothing but gratitude. For friendship, for survival, for second chances. At home, my mother had prepared a simple dinner. Nothing flashy, just our favorites. Jollof rice, grilled plantains, and a mango cake she knew I loved. She didn't say much, she rarely did. But as we ate, she slipped a box toward me across the table. Inside was a pen, silver and simple. "For the stories you've yet to write," she said. That one sentence was more than enough. Later that night, I stood on the rooftop of our apartment building, notebook in hand, city lights flickering in the distance. I thought about Lila and her notebook, about Maya's painting of me, about every girl who's ever been called too quiet, too odd, too much, or not enough. I was all of them once, and now, I was myself. I began to write, not a poem, not a letter, just words. Honest, unfiltered, mine. I am not the girl I was, but I carry her with me. I do not need applause to shine. I am the story I once prayed someone would write, and now I will write it myself. The wind picked up, tossing my hair around my face like confetti. Somewhere far off, I heard laughter, music, life. And I smiled because I was no longer hiding behind metaphors or fear. I was no longer pretending to be smaller just to fit. I was a diamond all along. Not perfect, not polished, but formed under pressure. And now, I wasn't just surviving. I was glowing. So to every version of me that ever wondered if this moment would come, watch me. I made it. Watch me shine.